We are at 9 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Amy Forbes, and I'm the training manager with the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Welcome to today's webinar called White Trauma, Creating Space for White People's Vulnerability with the Hopes of Undoing the Perpetuation of Structural and Systemic Racism, presented by Sharonda Jamerson. Going to tell you a little bit about our center before we get started. The Northwest MHTTC is a part of a nationwide network supported by SAMHSA. Our network includes 10 regional centers and one network coordinating office. And you can see there in the pink circle that the Northwest MHTTC covers Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington states. Sorry, shuffling things around here. So our goals at the Northwest MHTTC are to support mental health related evidence-based practices and best practices, heighten awareness, knowledge, and skills of the mental health workforce, foster alliances and address diversity of training needs, and then also share free publicly available training and TA. Our area of focus in the Northwest is evidence-based practices for psychosis. This includes CBTP for psychosis and then also assertive community treatment. We also do a multitude of other things and topics. You can find out more about all of that on our website, where we have live and recorded webinars, virtual learning communities, our online self-paced courses. We also have a resource library and our weekly newsletter, and then also check out our podcast called Putting It Together. And just some housekeeping for today. I know it was asked, we are recording this, and everybody will get a link to the recorded video, also the slides from today, and your certificate of attendance. So it'll come within about a couple weeks after this webinar. And please take note of the two boxes that you'll have on your screen, one for Q&A and one for chat. We really appreciate if the Q&A is reserved for questions directly to Sharonda. She will answer them live at the end of the webinar. So keep them coming, the questions, throughout the webinar. And use the chat if you need assistance from our team, just have general comments, greetings, anything like that. And at the end of the webinar, you will get a survey. We really, really do appreciate you filling out the survey. It really helps us kind of coordinate what we're doing for presentations in the future. And we must tell you that we are required by SAMHSA to do the survey, but they do not have any official position on the content that we present. This is just a little bit more information about how to connect with us on our website and our newsletter. And then we wanted to share some upcoming webinars that we have. I'm not sure if anybody was there for Lamar Lewis's last webinar, but he is coming back. This will be in April, motivation in mental health recovery. And then also, well, in March, so earlier, we're going to have the Tenant Law Center coming back. They're going to talk about when mental health and housing subsidies clash. And so I would like to introduce Sharonda Jamerson. She obtained a master's degree in clinical psychology in 2012 from City University College in Seattle, Washington, and became certified as a chemical dependency professional in 2007. Her experiences include developing, implementing, and presenting EDI trainings to associations of healthcare professionals, healthcare providers, schools, and community-based organizations. She's also presented at state and national behavioral health conferences on the topics of EDI and healthcare equity. She presents with confidence and passion, and we are very excited to have you back today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to need you guys to buckle in because this is a real dense training. Um, I took comments from the last training that I did last week. Um, and I start off with history. I always start off with history because we're here because what started way back when, showing so here's what my thinking was. So, this is what I hope the slides will reflect: history, bias, racism, trauma, healing, and then community. It's a lot that's going into this. So, and then we're going to kick it off uh, with a bang. We're just going to get right into it and understand. I need you guys to go ahead and feel whatever you're going to feel because we have to understand that something was done to us. This world was given to us the way it is. And as long as we keep looking at each other as an enemy, then it will continue to perpetuate the pain that we say we want to get away from. It will continue to be the barrier that has always been in place. So we won't get to know each other as to why they are trying to create laws around, what can be taught, what cannot be taught in school. I believe because they don't want us to connect. They don't want my humanity to connect with someone's humanity who doesn't look like me. So, Peyton, if you don't mind kicking off the video, it's 11 minutes long, but it's heavy hitting.
And this is a demonstration on how to race bait. First, let's talk about some of the stereotypes expressed in the 17th and 18th centuries. The vile and brutish parts of mankind, the marks of an alien race. Those were how the gentleman class described whites, poor whites to be exact, from Europe, many of whom were duped by a con game, promised an all-expense-paid trip to the New World, in return for years of free labor on the other side. Then there were those sentenced to work for 5 to 7 years of forced labor. In the 1700s alone, over 50,000 documented white men and women were shipped to the colonies and auctioned off as labor for crimes from petty theft to trespassing or pickpocketing. A slave was considered unfortunate, not inferior. To become a slave in the ancient world was not based on skin color, but the result of being on the losing side in a war. White indentured servants 400 years ago were seen as more or less the same as African slaves. They also made easy alliances, raging against greed, unfair taxes, oppressive land use regulations, and in the 1670s, one of those alliances nearly burned Jamestown to the ground. And the last to surrender were 100 men, 80 black and 20 white. And a law enforcement system was created to give whites slightly more privileges and force a separation in their contact with blacks. This three-tiered caste system, blacks on the bottom and poor whites a notch above, now treated more favorably, made them feel as though one day they might improve their status if they just worked hard enough. And maybe some did, but most did not, especially as the life expectancy was only 35. As all rights and freedoms were taken from Africans, this new racial caste system protected the wealthy landowners, who in the South would soon become known as the masters. And if you're interested in reading more about this, there's a page-turning thriller, not exaggerating, called The People's History of the United States, which you can download as an audiobook to support this series. The creation of that three-tiered caste system is the moment the modern institution of racial slavery is born, which would brutalize, divide, and crush the spirits of black men, women, and children for the next 200 years, and give many poor whites the idea that though their lives might be miserable, at least they weren't black. Until 1863. And as Michelle Alexander writes in The New Jim Crow, former slaves had a brief moment in the sun before they returned to a state akin to slavery or worse. The unprecedented economic might of the new United States, built on the backs of an enormous free slave labor force, would arguably be the single greatest factor contributing to what would soon become the world's largest modern superpower. And in gratitude, instead of helping freed slaves find homes, reunite with families, or help anyone, at the very least, heal from a 300-year-old trauma, they were largely neglected by the North, faced rampant disease, outbreaks of smallpox, cholera, many starved to death, and for the next 100 years, this thing called Jim Crow just took over for slavery. Enforced by government, courts, and law officers, forcing a continuation of an already well-established racial caste system on every aspect of American life. Ministers said whites were the chosen people, blacks cursed to be servants. God supported racial segregation. Craniologists, eugenicists, phrenologists, and social Darwinists at every educational level reinforced the belief that blacks were in every way inferior to whites. Massive social disadvantages, compounded by predatory lending and housing markets, and legally regulating blacks into ghettos, discriminatory bank lending practices, severe job discrimination, not to mention the lynchings, all continued until the 1960s. Now we're only talking 50 years ago. We finally have the Civil Rights Act, black nationalism and black power, black pride. For the first time, a public promise of opportunity after 3 centuries of the opposite, communities getting to police their own streets. But the black pride forces are soon struck down by the law and order movement. And what takes the place of what was once called Jim Crow? The invention of the largest prison industry in the world, in the form of new laws, tougher laws, more laws, longer sentences, mandatory minimums, more prisons, more police, and the barbaric war on drugs, which should be called the war on people, where blacks are far more likely to be arrested for selling or possessing drugs than whites, even though whites use drugs at the same rate, and are actually more likely to sell drugs. Blacks who've committed the exact same crimes as whites are more likely to be arrested, prosecuted, more likely to have longer prison sentences. Families deprived of breadwinners and once again deprived of the right to vote. Generations sentenced to a revolving door in and out of a prison system so unstoppable that 1 out of 3 black men born today can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. And so despite the existence of so many notable, heroic black, brown, and white cops saving lives and rescuing victims from unimaginable horrors across the country, righteous lawyers, wise judges, honest legislators doing great things that cannot and should never be overlooked, overall, Black America has never seen a substantive break in law enforcement service to larger forces ever on the wrong side of history. Policing for petty regulatory violations like failure to use a turn signal or lacking a front license plate. And so here we are today. 30% of America are minorities, but represent 60% of the prison population. Over 1 million men and women. And so the majority of Black America, 70%, understandably have little trust in law enforcement or the criminal justice system. But don't be fooled. This prison industrial complex has not only swept up Black America, but all people of limited means, hunting minorities and the poor at rates higher than any other on the planet. This thing grew bigger than anyone could have imagined. It's militarized and increased in scope and aggression. And as racist as it clearly is, even if we took all the minorities out of the equation, leaving only the white majority, we would still be over-incarcerated. We would still have vile police brutality. We would still have a criminal justice system desperately in need of reform. So just like the days of early slavery, today we still have a 3-tiered system. With notable exceptions, slightly more than half of Black Americans graduate from high school, compared to 3/4 of white Americans. And Black males are twice as likely to be unemployed as white males. Moving on to the second tier, we have poor whites, treated the second worst as a whole. With many more notable exceptions, so many you think it wasn't the case, white America is also in very bad shape. The real poverty rate for the US as a whole is staggeringly close to 50%. We have a myth of social mobility that is one of the worst in the industrialized world due to decades of disinvestment from communities sending cheap labor overseas, leaving depressed, isolated local economies with no jobs, a dwindling tax base, and nothing to attract business or new residents. And why is this? As the great journalist Emily Cleeth says, we should never say the word poverty without the words inequality and injustice being far behind. People become poor, not by personal failing, but because the system is engineered to push them down and keep them down. Yet despite numerous horrific incidents of police brutality and criminal injustice against whites, the beating of a homeless man or a horse thief to near death or to death, or the 1 million whites in prison, unprecedented in our nation's history, the majority of whites today, 57%, still have quite a lot, or a great deal of confidence in police, and a majority think the justice system is fair. The poor whites and victims of criminal injustice and inequality are spread out across the country and heavily divided by culture and politics. The so-called liberal or conservative news media is owned by 6 mega media companies that control 90% of our information. Those companies are owned by the very rich. According to Forbes, the 400 wealthiest Americans today have more money than the poorer half of the entire population of the United States. While less than 4% of our entire country are millionaires, they make up over half the members of Congress. Who do you think millionaires represent? The elite who run the country in a different revolving door of economic royalty have demonstrated certainly that they are above prosecution. So with a news media that mostly reports only on the black outrage of police brutality, which is and has been at a boiling point for the last 300 years, the white majority is confused. They make all kinds of assumptions, and the white minority, who are aware of the horrors of the criminal and justice system, but unaware of the history of Black America, feel themselves being lumped in with the elites. When they scream at Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson and call them race baiters, they're right to scream, but they're screaming at the wrong faces. The media is terrified to let the mass of Americans know the truth about our three-tiered caste system alive and well and keeping us divided. Why do I need to identify with those ancestors before me that committed genocide and not only enslaved, but brutalized the people who in chains and in struggle for civil rights created and inspired some of the greatest art, music, culture, writing, ideas, invention, and humanity the world has ever seen? I identify with being part of that struggle. I don't need to be proud of my blood because the same color red gives life to us all. I don't need to be proud of the color of my skin because I was never told I needed to be ashamed of it. True shame is only for those who have hate in their hearts, and that can be healed. I don't need to be proud of my religion because all the great religions warn us against pride. I am privileged to be a white, straight male in a society that favors those traits for which I had nothing to do with. Favors I might not even know I had. I grew up poor. There were a few years I was homeless, but I did not grow up Black, and I was blessed in my childhood to see the difference. To paraphrase Van Jones, even in a hoodie, I look less like Trayvon than I do like Mark Zuckerberg. So along the way, in forming my identity as a human being, I choose to identify with all of humanity in a struggle for harmony. You are my ally, and I am yours. I don't need to be better than someone else to feel good about myself. I need to feel the same. I acknowledge racism as existing and alive as it ever was, and in doing so, I eliminate any invented wall between us. When we ally ourselves with a movement that's been asking to just acknowledge for 4 odd centuries how overdue it is to just say 3 words, Black Lives Matter. Then united, we are a power that will shake the masters to their core. Yes, I say masters of the global economy that exploits not only our own nation but the entire planet. The masters of the commercial news, the military-industrial complex, prison complex, the overwhelming majority of the government. The masters corrupted by the influence too much power has on all human beings. For injustice and inequality are one and the same. Black, brown, white, sisters, brothers. The class struggle unites us all, as it always has. And race baiters, you are exposed.
All right. Y'all ready? All right. And just understand, let me pull up my slides. Understand that I am going to be talking about different relationships, but this is a blueprint. So you can take out Black people and you can put in the LGBTQ community. You can take out the LGBT community and put in the Native community. You can take that. It's a blueprint for how this has always worked for everyone who is considered othered. So let me bring up my slides. Hold on, you guys. I got to move this out my way. There, slideshow. Can you guys see my slides? I can't see anybody's faces, so somebody had to tell me.
We can see them, Sharonda, but there we go.
Okay. So again, the practice is allow yourself to feel your feelings. And the whole thing I want you to take from the video and from this presentation is what has been done to people of color has also been done to white people, but to a greater magnitude. And this was done to us. And as long as we keep assuming the role, this will continue to happen to us. And once if we didn't know it, then there's nothing we can do. But now that we're knowing what is happening, we have a responsibility at this point. We'll go to the next slide. So white trauma, I'm trying to create space for white people because what's not in my bio is that I consult with white people, managers who deal with people of color on how to deal with the people of color. I also consult with my minority supervisor who have majority white employees that they're struggling to deal with. So that's how I kind of got this going in the first place. And objective is to detect implicit bias and race-related trauma to begin working toward racial and mental health healing. Have a greater understanding of how implicit bias works and its impact. Create space for white bodies to heal. White bodies, we need you to do the work and heal. The privilege allow you to push things away, to blame other people, but I'm asking you to do the work. Maintain openness so we can all move forward. So we just got through watching the race baiter. These slides are actually from a real march that I actually went to. This is what Matthew Cook was talking about, the segregation of society based on arbitrary factors such as wealth, race, ethnicity, so on and so forth. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because he covered it very well. Just understand that before the Constitution was even made, people of color was not considered of value like white bodies. People of color was always considered as inferior, and as it was written in policies and in our Constitution. So understand, before the foundation of this world was created, there's already a definition written for people of color, and to get on the same playing field or be absorbed into the white community. Land was given to white settlers that came from the north, even the criminals that came from the north, because that was part of their punishment. You can't stay over here in England, so we're gonna send you over to America. But so they got theirs, although we've been working the land, Black people, people of color, and there's some indigenous white people who's working the land, and Native American and Chinese and Japanese who's working the land, but couldn't get the same opportunities that was given to white people. And then here's where the red lining is. So the red lining is just like the Jim Crow. So they made it affordable. They, meaning the elites, those who have the power to create such rules and regulations, they created affordable land in certain areas so they can isolate people to certain areas. And even if you were able to afford a house in a different area, they wouldn't allow you to come in because that zip code, that area that they outline, says if you're good for a loan or not. They didn't look at you as an individual. They looked at your zip code. Even to this day, they look at your zip code. And separating people, it will determine the quality of life expectancy. I know here in Washington State, if you went on, and I know I don't know if it's still up there because I haven't seen it, looked at King County website in a while, but you can go in, at one point in time, you can go in and put in your zip code and find out what is your life expectancy in that zip code. And they wouldn't be able to do that if redlining didn't still exist. So this historian was, he did some research, and it shows that, white supremacy preceded the origins of the United States of America. Every aspect of social interaction, particularly in the 18th, 19th centuries, was dominated by white identity, and white supremacy became an expression of American identity. And not all white people appreciate this white supremacy, and not all white people even like to even talk about white privilege because it's too painful for them to bear. When you have the elite controlling the narrative, this is what they're putting up. They're putting up Robert E. Lee, Confederate generals that harm people of color. They pushing the Confederate flags and the beliefs that come behind that. Separate but equal, which is not true. And then this one particular one says indigenous go back to where you came from. And Native says, took the words right out of my mouth. There's so many people feel like they have power over white bodies, over bodies of color, over Native body, over brown bodies. And then as long as we don't push back or speak our truth and show up, it will continue to happen. So is racism inherited? Robin DiAngelo wrote the book, White Fragility, Why Is It So Hard for White People to Talk About Race? And she says that if you're white in America, let's see what she say. If you are a white person in America, social justice educator Robin DiAngelo has a message for you. You are racist, pure and simple, and without a lifetime of conscious effort, you always will be. And then Tim Wise says nothing will change until Black Lives Matter more than white comfort. And you can also switch out, again, blacks for natives, for brown people, for, the others. A lot of people feel like Tucker Carlson. I have the privilege of not being totally aware of my own privilege. So here are some of the reasons that I've heard white people say as to why they don't get involved or why it's difficult for them to get involved. I don't see color, which is extremely offensive, just so you know. I don't want to be called a racist. What difference what you're called? At least you're trying to make a difference. We get called things all day long, but we still got to put in the effort or we just be left out. We meaning the others, not just Black people, but the others. I don't know what to say, so I don't say anything. It's not me, it's them, as if you don't identify with the people who look like you. I didn't do it, so why should I have to, participate in it? Well, there's a saying that if there was an oil spill or a toxic spill in your community that was causing cancer in that community, although you didn't cause it, you will want to help fix it because you see the harm coming to your family. Some people say they feel ashamed. Some people say they just feel guilty. And all these reasons, excuses, or statements are barriers to progress. And when we don't get involved, and when white voices don't heal their bodies and be able to speak up, and we'll talk about a little bit later as to why that is, this is what's in play. You still have the richest people are still white. Congress, white. Governor, white. Military, white. House of Freedom, white. Current cabinets, white. And this also come out of Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And it matters. What books we get to read, what news we hear, what podcasts we listen to, being able to see someone who look like you when you're trying to go to school, all this stuff matters. It shows that people of color, when they go to school in areas of dense population that looks like them, they do better. Their self-esteem is higher. They function better. So let's talk about the natural biases of implicit bias. This is something that we cannot control, but we have to be aware of. The amygdala, the part of the brain, it evaluates everything that we experience socially, our direct experience, our vicarious experience, it evaluates it. Then we have the cortex that detects the stimuli, like what's happening. And then you have the anterior cingulate cortex, and then you have the prefrontal cortex that regulate the amygdala and the responses. So these are things that automatically happen in our brains, and we don't even know what's there until it's squeezed out of us. We will talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So let's talk about the impact of implicit bias. 70% of people in the US display an anti-Black bias using the ITA. The ITA is when they put in positive words. Do you say Black or do you say white? When you do negative words, and you got it's done within 7 seconds. Because if you do it past that, they'll cut it off because they know you're thinking. But the whole goal is for you to see what it is you're carrying. Individuals with strong anti-Black bias report greater implicit prejudice against Blacks and have a greater negative interactions with Black experimenters. Yeah, implicit bias is not altered by wanting to look good for others. We have to know what we're carrying. We can't be concerned about other people's opinion or thoughts or labels or any of those types of things. We have to know. We have to do the work. We have to be uncomfortable. That's where the growth comes. So I won't go through this whole thing, but it just shows that that strong automatic preference for Black people compared to white people is very low. Strong automatic preference for white people compared to Black people is very high. So we still have this bias against what's beautiful, what's not, what's good, what's bad, who we should protect ourselves from. And that's misleading because if you look at the number one murderers of per capita in the United States, it's white males. But we're saying that the Black male or the Native male or the Hispanic male are the scariest ones. Yes, they do commit the crimes, but understand that when you don't have privilege, then there's a chance that we know that these people, the others, are going to get caught. But when you're not looking at the white males because they get a pass because of the color of their skin, they can do more damage and can do it for a longer period of time until they're caught. Bias and race. Because of bias and race, and I know it may seem small to some people, but if you in the South and it's really hot and you're trying to go vote, you want to get in, you want to get out. It takes longer for African Americans people to get in to vote. Pairing negative words, we just talked about negative words to Black people versus the white people. And so how you see people is how you're going to treat them. So you know how people see you by the way they treat you. So they don't have to call you out your name or use a derogatory term. You will know by how they treat you. And even waiting for to cross the pedestrian to cross the street, it takes them longer because cars will just keep going much longer if you are a person of color than if you're white. Explicit bias. Explicit bias is when you are aware, you know what's going on, and you believe the evaluation is to be correct. The implicit bias is what I'm really focusing on, because this is what is out of your awareness. I'm not saying, and I don't believe no one else is saying when we talk about implicit bias, we're not talking about anyone doing anything intentionally. We're talking about things that have been downloaded in our system that we don't even know it's there until it comes out. It's automatic. As you see, the first one says automatic triggers. As we talked about in the couple of previous slides, it's automatic bias that's been downloaded. And as we talked about history, look where it came from. This was done to us, to divide us. So when we don't do anything about it, then the narratives that is created is these things. I am not a color. No, I'm not going to come mow your lawn. Not all Muslims are terrorists. But these are the things that have been put in our mind without our permission because of what has been subliminal messages, the street names and the military bases and like I said, the what is called the statues, all to support and to push the agenda about what is beautiful, what is not, what is correct, what is not, and how we should act and how we should not act, and who get privilege and who do not get privilege. So lack of understanding equals lack of meaningful relationship. Judging is easier to understand. I'm sorry, judging is easier than understanding. Lack of understanding create the barriers. Barriers reinforce the ignorance, and the ignorance of the cycles, we perpetuate that. So let's talk about race and trauma. This is also one of the marches that I went through. And if you can read what these ladies have on their shirt, it says, if they start shooting, stand behind me. That is, and in Black Lives Matter, that is a bold statement to make. And these women, because I talked to them, didn't know them prior to going to this march, but they've done the work. They understand what is happening. They understand why it is happening, and they understand that it's the system that's dividing us, is not us choosing to stay divided. So trauma is where we experience we experience very stressful, frightening, or distressing events. It could be one time, it could be ongoing events. The symptoms of those things is muscle tension, feeling easily overwhelmed, having trouble sleeping, having nightmares, memory issue, foggy brain, or even trouble focusing. So the different type of racism. So the historical racism we covered, and racism will never go away because it's too profitable. It just changes shape. It shifts shapes. So like I said, the redlining now is just creating areas where people can afford and where people cannot afford. That's just another way of creating redlining. But it still exists. The Jim Crow still exists. Whites here, black here. The lynching is changed. It is the murder of people of color with no consequences and no jail time. Exoneration still exists. Everything that we see back then exists today. It's just in a different form. And if we don't pay attention, it's just harder to recognize. But people of color, we have to step on that because we will be subjected to things if we don't pay attention to it. Interpersonal racism occurs, and this is what we're talking about, how we're treating each other because of our own biases. We have to do the internal work. We have to see ourselves before we can see other people. We have to work on ourselves before we can help other people. If we don't work within ourselves, then we will injure other people, because hurt people hurt other people, even if it's not intended. Internalized racism is when so much stuff has been coming at you that you now don't even like yourself. You don't like what you see in the mirror. You want to start talking different, acting different, being different, just so you won't have to be in your own skin. And you're causing harm not only to you, but your community, and then the people who you say you want to help. Structural racism is what we talked about, what Matthew Clark talked about in the video. A cumulative and compound effect of history, culture, ideology, institutional policies, systematic privilege, systematically privileged white people, and disadvantaged people of color, anti-Blackness. Racial trauma is a cumulative effects of racism on individual mental and physical health, including chronic microaggressions. People are often harmed by someone in position of power of them. It does not only occur when a person directly experiences racism. Racial trauma can also be experienced vicariously. So every time we see someone getting killed in the street, a Black person get killed in the street, a Native or Hispanic, or even in the water down in Mexico, that's trauma for us. They don't even have to look like us for us to have that type of trauma, because we understand what that is and we understand why that is. Okay, now I'm trying to calm down because I'm starting to rev up. Complex trauma, exposure to multiple traumatic events, often of an invasion into personal natural nature, and the wide range of long-term effects on their exposure. Racial trauma compromises the mental, physical health effects and consequences that Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience after being exposed to repeated racism. So survivors usually feel like they have been unable to escape. Unresolved trauma can trigger a real physical pain and disease, lead to a range of self-destructive behavior, take a toll on our family life and interpersonal relationship. Trauma can be blocked out, but it doesn't mean that he, she, they, or them will not feel the effects of it. The effects of unresolved trauma can be devastating. It can affect our habits, our outlook on life, leading to addictive and poor decision-making, and perpetuating racism and suffering. Trauma bodies. Trauma lives in the body. It is a spontaneous protective mechanism used by the body to stop any future potential harm. It is a highly effective tool for safety and survival. An embedded trauma response can manifest as fight, flight, or freeze. Trauma can get stuck in the body and will stay there until it is addressed. The body is where we live. It is where we fear, hope, and react. It is where we constrict, relax. The body cares most about safety and survival. If you are in that space, how can you then have enough space to get involved with something as so heavy as trying to interrupt racism when you're trying to survive in your own body? Trauma bodies. From the body's perspective, not the cognitive perspective, the body perspective. From the body perspective, safety or danger is neither situational nor based in cognitive feeling. Rather, they are physical, visceral sensation that the body used to sense safety or danger. Danger can mean more than just bodily harm. It can mean a threat to what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, or yearn for. The body will do what it needs to do to recover a sense of safety. Trauma sets in very quickly into the body, too quickly to involve the rational parts of the brain. So there's things that our bodies have experienced that has been recorded inside of our nervous system that we have no knowledge of until it comes out. Trauma can cause us to react to current events that seems wildly inappropriate, overcharged, and out of proportion. Like white rage. As Carol Anderson, a professor at Emory University, has said, the presence of Black and brown body is not the trigger of white rage. It is the presence of Black and brown body with ambition, drive, aspirations, and those who want to achieve do not accept their subjugation. People who demand their rights. So those of us who are of color, non-white folks, non-binary folks, when we are saying we want our rights, some white people feel like that's a threat to their livelihood and the way that they do things, and they want to seem superior than some of us. White rage can be hard to detect because it is cloaked in reasonableness. We need to keep our community safe. That sounds very reasonable, but how you go about it may not be. We must protect our children. Very reasonable, but how you go about it may not be. We must ensure safety and security for our neighbors. Agreed, but how are you going to go about it? I fear for my life. A lot of us fear for our lives, but it's about how we go about it. Trauma bodies. There is something about an event, person, situation that rekindles an old pain or discomfort, and the body tries to address it with reflective energy that is still stuck inside of our nervous system. The body then begins to create a strategy around stuckness, involving extreme reaction, uh, strong likes and dislikes, compulsions, extremely irrational fears, and unusual avoidance strategies over time. This can be embedded in the body as a standard way to survive and protect itself. So some of the way that our white bodies show up, because white bodies have legacy of trauma too. Trauma can be passed down, as I will get to. And how we choose or not choose to deal with that is going to get stuck in our bodies, and we are going to create strategies around that. And it may not be the healthiest way to do that. And then we impact other people when we do that. When these strategies are repeated, they can be passed down to the next generation. It can become the standard response in families, communities, and cultures. So when we dismiss, oh, that's how this culture is, we could be talking about a culture of people who suffer from generational trauma or direct trauma or vicarious trauma, and it's just easier for us to say, oh, that's just how they are, versus digging in and understanding why it is. Trauma bodies. Recent work through human genetics suggests that trauma is passed on through our DNA expression through the biochemistry of our human eggs, sperm, and womb. No matter what we look like, if we're born and raised in America, white body supremacy and our adaptation to it is in our bodies. Effects of trauma: induce anxiety, arrest the vocal cords, the vocal process, and block the creative flow of authentic self-expression. Trauma affects involuntary nervous system, body, brain, and memory function. It is hard to recognize this level of trauma. Therefore, it gets mislabeled or dismissed as being part of someone's personality. Oh, that's just how they are. Oh, they got a personality disorder. No, that's how their trauma shows up. We can't correct something if we're going to mislabel something because it's easier for us not to have to deal with that. So for people of color, this level, we have multi-level complex trauma that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And it literally suppresses our voices, and we don't know how to show up in this world without fear of being beaten, killed, arrested, fired, blackballed, labeled, you name it, dominance, oppressed, through direct trauma, vicarious trauma, microaggression, stereotype, prejudice, all that. Voicelessness is the voice being taken from you because you're just so beat down with everything that has happened and is happening and continues to happen. Silence, on the other hand, is more where people who have a little bit more freedom or a little more space in their nervous system, where they can take in more, but they choose not to speak up because they like to avoid conflict. That could be one of their survival mechanisms because they never address the trauma in the body. because doing the right thing is not popular. Yeah, I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be the spectacle. Or when they feel that it's going to hurt their chances of success, they won't say anything. When they are too concerned about other people's opinion, I don't want to be outcast. Not wanting to be labeled, people stay silent. So Black people are not exhausted. Let's see, this is in my way. Sorry, you guys. Black Being Black is not exhausting. White supremacy, white silence, systematic racism, white feminism, white-centered wellness, race-based violence, oppression, injustice. That's what's exhausting. The way the system is operating and the way people are pushing and supporting that system that's exhausting Black and brown and indigenous bodies. Okay, now oh, there we go. Sorry. So everyday discrimination around inquiries about someone's day-to-day life, treated by others, perceived by others, and behaviors. So these questions are for the others. In your day-to-day life, how often do any of these following things happen to you? Where you're treated with less courtesy, where you're treated with less respect, where you perceive to be where you perceive poor service than other people, where people act as if you're not smart, where people act as if they are afraid of you, where people act as if they think that you are dishonest, when people act as if you are better, they're better than you, or uh, when you've been called names or insulted, or been threatened, harassed. That's pretty often on a regular basis. And the sad part is the people who are doing it don't even realize they're doing it or don't even intend to do it on purpose. But that's what's happening. And it takes a toll. I'm deciding whether to build you up today or to tear you down. That can be a conscious or subconscious decision, a lot of times according to how we wake up in the morning, how we feel, and if we want to deal with someone or not. It's time for a change. We must change what we are looking for within self and others so we can change what we see. If we don't change what is going on inside us, and if you guys haven't understood the theme by now, you have to correct what's in you before you can understand and see what's in someone else. We can't dive into our greatness until we touch the depths of our suffering. We can't touch the depth of our suffering until we can identify what the suffering is. Healing and change takes place within relationship, not policies or law. We have to get to know each other. We have to get involved with other people's cultures and try each other's food and each other's celebrations. There's multicultural celebrations going on a lot. There's a lot of movies going on. If you don't want to learn in public, if you just want to go to the movies, or there's a lot of books, there's so much stuff out there that we can no longer say we don't know. We don't know how to get to it. There's even the I read banned books book club. So now you know what books to read. If they're banned, you should read them. We will never be able to see others until we are able to see ourselves. And once we begin to see others, then we will be able to appreciate the different worldviews with less judgment. The illusion. My goodness. The illusion created by awareness. We believe that we can control more about ourselves and our universe than we actually can. We believe that we know what our preferences are and why we have them. That's what we believe. However, human behavior is a result of both implicit and explicit attitudes. The more we avoid, ignore, or deny something, the more we are to believe that we have a mastery over it. Just because we pressed it down, just because we put some distance between us and whatever the issue is, you didn't get away with anything and you haven't mastered anything. You just put more on your nervous system to store. That's all you did. The reality is that it's just one more thing stored into your nervous system. Okay, I was ahead of my own self. Managing personal implicit bias. Become aware of your own biases. Again, you can take the implicit bias test. As a matter of fact, I attached an 8-question. When we get to it, you'll see it, where you can start asking yourself questions so you can then start pinpointing also where your biases lie. You can also know when something happens and you immediately jump to conclusion that it's this, that, and the other, your biases are coming up. Slow down and ask yourself if your response are warranted. Would I have done that if this was a man? Would I have done this if this was an elder? Would I have said that if this was a child? We really got to start questioning our motives. Why? Because that's one of the main ways to find out what are our belief system rooted in. Our original thought process, or let's see, yeah, our the word I'm looking for is ideology. Our original initial ideology has been passed down to us. It is up to us to figure out our own thought process, what we believe, what we don't believe, and if the stuff that's been passed down to us is relevant to today. If it's not, we have a responsibility to change that, and not practice what has been told to us and not believe what we was told to believe about ourselves or even other people. Because the one thing I really need you guys to understand is you can be introduced to a person or a culture before actually coming in contact with that person or that culture. So just let me give you a quick example. When you fax your resume over to an employer, you've just been introduced to that employer. When you're talking to a friend and someone's constantly talking about their mother or the cooking and whatever, as soon as you go over there, you hear people say, I feel like I already know you. So and so talking about you so much. So we can be introduced to TV programs. And the early programs didn't favor people of color, Chinese, Japanese, Native American at all. That stuff got passed down to great grandma, grandpa, to great, to grand, to mom and dad, to you. So what is the narrative of our family? Be careful about decision making because again, we don't know what our intuition is rooted in. Explicit diversity. I'm sorry, elicit diversity into let me slow my brain down. Elicit diversity input into decision making. When there's a couple of slides down that we're going to talk about the benefits of why you should do that, and then humility. Practice some humility. Cultural competence. Increase awareness of social and cultural factors that impact health, belief, and behaviors, or on an organizational level, structural level, clinical level. Assess the impact of such measures. If it's not working, go back to the drawing board. If it's working, keep it going. Develop tools and skills to manage these factors. Minority recruitment, interpreter services, provide education around cross-cultural issues, meeting the needs of the disabled and the aging community, provide gender-neutral bathrooms, empower people to be active partners in their life, at work, and in their community. Stop thinking you know it all or you know what's best for others. So some people just don't understand the difference between equality and equity. So then when we go to the definitions, then the question is, which do you think support white supremacy? So equity or equality is where everyone is treated the same exact way, regardless of the differences. People's like, oh yeah, that's great. Equity is everyone is provided with what is needed to succeed. Big difference. So I want to talk a little bit about affirmative action. So affirmative action is a government program. I'm sorry, this is Affordable Care Act. I'm going to go to this one and I'll go back. So affirmative action is viewed as people of color getting unearned privileges, which I think is laughable, but okay. Even if that is true, affirmative action only got people of color in the door. They had to prove themselves in order to prove themselves if they was going to stay. Affirmative action is viewed as reverse racism. That is so untrue. It was creating equity, creating an equitable situation for people who's been left behind. That's what affirmative action is, not reverse racism. It is about equity. Voting down affirmative action hurt white women more than any other geographics. Why? Because there's plenty of reports to show that white women was the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action. So another government program, I got them backwards, sorry. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics report that white people are the largest beneficiary when it comes to government assistance program. Without government assistance program that were designed to aid working class, white people would have severely been disadvantaged. According to the report, who got medical coverage after the Affordable Care Act came into play, 8.2 white people gained access to medical care. 2.8 Black people gained medical, and then 6.2 Hispanics benefit from Affordable Care Act. So it's in our collective interest to embrace the government programs that they put out there to try to level the playing field for those who got left behind. They're the ones who created the problem, so let them fix the problem. Let's not deny what they're trying to put out there to help us by coming against each other saying, no, we don't want this because it's going to help this group of people, or no, we don't want this because no, we all need the support and we all need the help. As Matthew Cook said, we have more in common across the board than the one percenters. Even if you look like them, it doesn't matter. Our experiences are more connected than white people who are on the lower echelon than the white people who are on the higher echelons. You have more common with people of color at your same level than you do with the people who look like you who are higher up. So opposing the Affordable Care Act has actually been harmful to white people. And here, when Affordable Care, here's some of the conversations that I was a part of when Affordable Care Act came out. So when they said that let's support the it was called, instead of called Affordable Care Act, it was called Obamacare. So I'm listening to these I'm listening to these people saying, I don't want Obamacare. I don't want it, because it was called Obamacare. And they said, okay, well, fine. Let's just go with the Affordable Care Act. Oh, yeah, I'll support the Affordable Care Act. It was the same thing. It's the same exact thing. But when they thought when it was named after, and people was being sarcastic when they were saying when it was naming it Obamacare, it always had been Affordable Care Act. But white people wouldn't endorse it unless it was called Affordable Care Act. When they thought it was Obamacare, absolutely not. And most Republican state that has majority Black people in their state refuse it. They refuse it, and so therefore the care in their state was not good, and a lot of people got sick. And if you looked at when COVID happened, where most of the deaths were, and still are. Oops, sorry. So stifled innovation. There is a wealth of evidence that indicate that diversity enhances creativity and allow for greater innovation. Research from McKinsey found that racial and ethnic diversity also lead to greater financial returns for corporations. When there is no diversity within a group, the same ideas, thoughts, and beliefs create an echo chamber. Nothing new here, people. Refusing to hire people of different racial background will disadvantage companies no matter how successful they was in the past. Environmental justice. Environmental racism is the disproportionate impact on environmental hazards to the BIPOC community. So even in the redlining, a lot of factories that spew out toxics, a lot of people, color and poor people, live in those areas. Breathing in those fumes allow for health issues, particularly asthma. So a lot of people who struggle with COVID and died are those people in those areas who have to suck in pollutions day in, day out before a major disaster, a major pandemic like COVID hit. We can't have climate change without a sacrifice zone. We can't have a sacrifice zone without disposable people. You can't have disposable people without racism. What many fail to realize is that what is done to the BIPOC communities, from the Flint water crisis to the fracking on indigenous land, has a deleterious effect on everyone. Upholding white supremacy will ultimately deteriorate the earth that we all share. So I look at this like a crack in your windshield, and then it finally just spread across. It may be secluded at first, but enough interaction, impact, it will spread all the way across. So when you think you're harming one person, it's just a matter of time before it hits your back door. None are free until all are free. Perfectionism is white supremacy by another name. For white supremacy to thrive, there must always be a subordinate caste to oppress. Anyone or any person at any time can become part of that marginalized community through no fault of their own. You get in a car accident, now you're disabled, now you're part of the marginalized community. You marry someone of color, and it's not acceptable. You now became a part of the marginalized community. And then white people who do not fit the picture of perfection that is deemed the prototype of whiteness are at risk of being castigated and banished from white supremacy society. And this is from white people, by the way. I thrive on change. You threw a fit this morning because your mom put less jelly on your toast than yesterday. I thrive on making other people change. You can't really affect change on others until you affect change within. It's important to understand, I'm not going to belabor this, white supremacy, the social, economic, and political system that collectively enable white people to maintain power over people of other races. White privilege, advantages of people, advantages a person have in society because of their skin, no other reason. It's not to say that white people who have privilege won't struggle, won't have a hard time. It just means that there's more opportunities out there for you to have a white doctor, have a white professor, to be able to have a white clinician, to have job opportunities in areas that other people don't, even with a degree and don't have a criminal background. There's a research on that one. Systematic racism, group level processes and structure that are implemented in the reproduction of racial inequality, racial trauma, the cumulative effects of racism on the individual mental, physical health that leads to trauma symptoms, including anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, as well as physical health issues. Healing racial trauma. For people of color to heal from racial trauma, there needs to be an acknowledgement, sorry, I keep moving this, acknowledgement of racism and its impact. Also, there needs to be an implementation of racial trauma training. Why? Racial trauma has its own set of challenges and debilitating effects. It's this whole animal and a category within itself. Although the negative effects of racism is supposed to be has been documented and recorded, it continues to be omitted from the DSM. There's no diagnosis for it. The term weathering is used to describe Black, brown, and indigenous body. It is a process of being worn down by long exposure of racism. Public health came up with that definition, by the way. This one, one of the main reasons why this is one of the main reasons why white bodies outlive Black, brown, and indigenous bodies by double digits, 25 years to be exact. So this is the 8 questions that you need to ask yourself to figure out how do you really think and to really pay attention. And look, do it in your own private time. So you don't have to worry about anyone else's opinion or what people might think of you. Only thing that matters and when you do this is what you think of yourself. Are you satisfied with your answers? Are you satisfied with how these answers are making you feel? Do you feel like you're on target with these answers? If you do, then cool. If not, then there's some work to be done. And it also is going to show you what kind of person you are to yourself. Because at the end of the day, we've been living with ourselves for so long that we think we know what we don't know about ourselves until people give us feedback. So we on the outside, we on the inside looking out, people on the outside looking in. Both of those perspectives are necessary for us to gauge how are we really showing up. And is this the way we want to show up? Are we having the impact that we really want to have? You have to be open to feedback. White supremacy and trauma. So this came from a white passing person. She's Italian, from the last training I did last week. So I thought it was relevant, so I put it on the screen. White supremacy is traumatic for all of us. It creates expectations and standards to live by that are unattainable for most. When we come up short, we either blame ourselves or look outside of ourselves to someone or something to blame, creating a division between our shared humanity and predicament. White supremacy stripped us from our humanity and true connection to one another. That's what white supremacy does. And to take it a step further, people of color have to assume a role in order to be able to get some of the goodies that white supremacy, not white supremacy, but the white culture provide. Code switching. To this day, we still can't wear our hair the way we want to wear our hair. There's a court case going on right now in Texas, where a young person is fighting to get his graduation certificate, and still be allowed to wear his natural locks. And you guys may have seen where there was a wrestler on the court who was wrestling at a match, and they told him you have to cut off your locks if you want to continue. There's been people still being sent home from school because of the way they wear their hair. That shows that there's some bias around how we show up authentically and our natural way of being. But when we tone ourselves down, tone our emotions down, straighten our hair, and cater to the oppressive environment, then everybody's cool. But when we show up as our authentic self and people are uncomfortable, we created the problem. Absolutely not. It's because if you are uncomfortable, you got to figure out why you're uncomfortable with how we're showing up. Why are you uncomfortable with our afros? Why are you uncomfortable with the way we dress, the food that we eat? Why are you so, just why? Why so many questions? Hold on. It blacks out. I don't know what's happening. Okay. In conclusion, well, I went through this really fast. I thought I was going to take much longer, but that leaves a lot of time for us to have a discussion. I am ready to stop resisting and to start existing. I am my full and authentic self, as my full and authentic self. The truth is, I am what the world looks like. You are what the world looks like. Collectively, we are what the world looks like. And in order for our system to reflect that, they don't have to create a new reality. They just have to accept the one we already live in. And yeah, I thought it was going to be much longer, but okay, let's discuss. I'll take any questions that you guys may have. I know it was a lot. It was a lot for sure.
It was a lot. Hello, I'm back. Sorry, getting everything adjusted on my end. Thank you so much, Sharonda. You got lots of love going on here. I see with everybody's emojis popping up. We had a lot of chat happening too, lots of support, lots of resources being shared. I appreciate all of that. We do have some questions that I can get started here. So let me get them over here. One of our first questions was about the statistics that you posted a while ago in the presentation, proving that people do better learning and growing when they are in an environment with people who look like them.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to integrate this fact into our solutions?
Well, so I can tell you what has happened here. So in my clinic, here's in my clinic. Let me move this out the way so you guys can you guys see me? Okay. What we did was we got with the upper management and said, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we hear the clients seeing, this is what the clients are saying. So what was happening was when a lot of the death was going, a lot of the murders was going on with Black lives, even our white colleagues stepped up and like, we have to change, we have to implement diversity into our clinic because we want to reflect the clientele in which we see. Because what was happening is even though there was clients who wasn't on my caseload or wasn't even in my clinic, they would seek a person of color out to talk to feel safe. They did not want to talk to even if they had a good relationship with their white counselors, they didn't want to talk to them because they felt like they didn't understand. Even people who was in interracial relationships or have children who don't look like them, they couldn't even help their child because they didn't know enough, or they couldn't help their spouse or relate to their spouse or comfort their spouse because they did not know enough. So back to the clinic, we looked at our interviewing tools. What questions are we asking? What questions do we need to ask? What do we need to change about this? And then what they started doing is when it came down to interviewing someone for a position, they brought a diverse group of people together to interview, to ask different questions to the interviewee. And we got a better picture, better perspective on a person who we might want to bring on to hire. So we spoke with management. We told them what we wanted. We looked at the ways that we've been doing things. We revised some things that we have been doing to create the outcome that we were looking for. And we do have that. We absolutely have that. We now have transgender, um, uh, Hawaiian, uh, Latinx, Latino, African Americans, and white. Yeah. Now our clinic is pretty diverse and it has been great. It really has.
Thank you. Our next question. Sorry, just a second. What are your thoughts on white affinity groups in the workplace? And do you have any recommendations, suggestions, and or ideas on how they can be successful?
So this is what we did here. Again, there's been a lot of changes here. So if I talk a lot about this clinic, it's because this is what I have firsthand knowledge of. So we have white affinity, Black affinity, people of color, LGBTQ affinities. We have a point person and all of those affinities that get together once a month, or I think it's once a month or once every 6 weeks, to talk about what the concerns and the issues are. And so with that, then we would allow each of the affinities to write questions to the next affinity to answer, and then the point person would take it back and then they would discuss. Does that make sense? So that's how we did it. And I think that is good. I think it's good to have affinity groups because what I do also know, it's not what I think. I'm telling you what my experience have been. I'll put it that way. There are some white people who absolutely just don't want to learn in public. And that's one of white supremacy, roles of white supremacy is keep people hiding from other people and from themselves. And the downside to white privilege, from my perspective, is that it's harder for white people to be vulnerable. It's harder for them to admit what they don't know. It's hard for them to ask questions. It's hard for them to ask for support. That's the downside of white privilege. And so I'm happy for the white affinities group, because I think that they will open up more in ways that they probably wouldn't if it was a more diverse group. So I support that.
And then somebody was asking if you could define what is an affinity group.
Well, what we call, what I'm assuming that the affinity group is what we call the caucusing. So it's just the people who are in our not just in our clinic but in the whole hospital. We get together and just talk about what we're seeing, what the issue, what the impacts are, what the needs are, and then like the white affinity group, not only do they process what they've seen and what they heard, they also talk about what change they can bring about. And then they can also send messages to the other affinity groups or the caucus groups, and say, how can we be of support? Because the one thing that the white caucus group is starting to understand is, just because we think that is helpful doesn't mean that it is helpful. So we want to ask them, how can we show up as being helpful? So more conversation is being had about how can we show up with support and not cause more injury. So the affinity group, caucus group is the same from my perspective.
Great. Great answer. I'm sorry. I am I am listening and busily going through the rest of the Q&A here too. We've got a lot of stuff going on, so I'm glad we have extra time. Bringing it back to those 8 questions.
Yes.
Someone's asking, can you talk more about the quote problem and sickness? I'd love more clarity about the questions we're answering.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it says in conclusion.
Yeah, okay. Let me go back.
There you go.
Yeah. So in your own time space head, what do you call the problem? The problem when you're saying that the problem with our society is, what is it? The problem with people of color is, what is it? Uh, the problem with gender neutral bathroom, it is. You got to start the things that bother you the most within yourself. These are the questions that help you identify or allow for yourself to have this secret conversation within yourself to figure out if you are under the illusion that you believe that you are one person when you really are another. Are you showing one way when you believe you're showing up another way? Are you having the impact that you want to have? These questions are designed to help you figure out what you identify in the problem, because sometimes we don't know until we start digging in within ourselves what the problem is. So like me, I would say, what do I call the problem? For me, the problem is our forefathers. The problem is the 1%er. The problem is, so I'm not blaming one person because I know it's a system thing. The problem is our ignorance. That's what I would say. What do you think has caused the problem? Again, it's our history. It was the way our history was created. It is the narrative that they created the biases in us that cause us to treat each other the way we do. That is what I believe caused the problem. What do you think? Why do you think it started when it did? Because if you look at history, and particularly if it's in the book, My Grandmother's Hand, the white bodies that came to this country, they came traumatized. And I don't know if you guys ever looked at history or even looked at a movie and was like, oh my God, I don't understand how people can treat each other that way. Or I don't understand how they can, shave scalp somebody. I don't understand how they can cut somebody belly open, or how they can whip or hang people. In order for you to be able to feel comfortable doing stuff like that, you have to be desensitized to it. That means you're exposed to it over and over and over and over again in order for you to be able and want to participate in such activities and to be able to stomach it. So those are the bodies that came over here. And those bodies was traumatized in Europe before they even got here. So that's a trauma that has been passed down in white bodies as well. And they were people seeking religion freedom, and they came over and try to control people with religion over here. So everything they was trying to escape, they brought over here. Everything that was done to them, they brought over here, and they did it to other people. So if you don't understand history, and if you don't know your history, then we're going to come up with the wrong conclusion, and we're going to find the wrong people to blame. And then we sit with our shame and sit with our guilt, and all those are barriers. How severe is the sickness? Listen, if we're having this conversation and we're talking about trauma, we're talking about the way our society was created, the bias it created, the racism, the trauma, the impact of the trauma, and it's been going on for decades. It's pretty severe. The sickness within our society is pretty severe, and that's because we keep passing it on to the next generation. When are we going to interrupt it? What kind of treatment do I think? Conversations, trainings, reading banned books. There's a great movie out, at least it was, I think it's streaming now. Origins helps that out. Helps explain a lot of stuff that I'm talking about. There's one called American Fiction, I think it's called, which break down a lot of the Black stereotypes. That is another movie that recently came out. So there's stuff streaming. There's gatherings you can go to, and there's this university here in Tacoma. I know there's people from other states that are on here, but they have a conference every year for anybody really, but particularly for people of color, to unlearn the white way of doing treatment and implement and find our own voice and our own ways, our own style to deal and address people of color that we serve. And my white friends are the ones who knew about this, called me up, registered us, made me take the day off, which I'm grateful for, and I'm straight up allies, and they are learning with me. I have some white colleagues who went down to, not colleagues, but friends, who went down to Alabama to the lynching memorial. So it is really good when you can get people who don't look like you, and you guys can learn together, and you guys can process together. When there was a group of us who went to go see the movie Origins, I think we're in let's see. No, I thought I put in one of these slides, but it was a group of us from all different walks of life. We got Jewish people, we have mixed race people, we have all kinds of people. We went to go watch this movie, and this is one thing we used to do a lot before the pandemic. We go watch a movie that is built around racial, like Harriet, the Just Mercy. We all went to the movies to go see those. Then we went across the street to a restaurant, and then we just processed. We just loved on each other. We talked about our feelings, our emotions. We talked about what came up for us. We talked about and then we're learning in that same process. Like, oh, I never thought about that, or I never thought you felt like that, or I never knew you felt like that, or I didn't know, so we just discover things within ourselves, and we share what comes out of ourselves after watching things that are racial evoking, triggering inside of us. So those are some of the things that has been extremely successful. And then after that, when the world started going crazy, we all check on each other. The Jewish community, when the synagogues get defaced, hey, you guys good? When something happened in the Black community, hey, you guys good? That was something that never happened until we got together and we started, because down at the Post night, when there was shooting at the Post nightclub, I was talking to some folks who work here at the in the LGBT community, and we were just having conversations about how Black folks, we don't feel seen after there's been an atrocity done to our community. White guy walking up to into our Black church, shooting up our Black people, or going to or watching what's going on at the border with our Mexican brothers and sisters, just all these different things and how that vicariously traumatize us. And then we're drained and our heart is broken, and you still expect us to come in and give whatever we have left? Absolutely not. So we now come to each other and check on each other. And they were saying that it just went over their head. They never even thought to check in. They just never even thought about it. And the LGBT community felt so isolated, as the Black community, as the Latinx community, when things are happening in our community. Now white people come and check on us, and then say, "Hey, you need a hug?" Some of you come give us hugs. I had one lady come in here, said, white lady, she's just trying to, I see you, I hear you, and I stand with you. Then another white lady, she paints. So she painted a picture. I have it on my wall with that very thing. I stand with you, I see you, I hear you. We have more in common,
Thank you,
people,
Sharonda.
than not. And this is the labor of love for me to be here to talk about these things. This is not this is not an easy thing to open myself up to hundreds of people and just talk about this stuff. So this is my labor of love. This is my olive branch. Um, so we can start connecting. It's extremely important, and I see the benefits of us coming together and connecting. That's how we got Juneteenth as a national holiday. That's how we got people talking more about, now they can't hide the truth. Like, what is Juneteenth? Now it's a holiday. We got to talk about it. We got to explain some things. Um, like I said, we got more people checking in with us and on us, showing us love, giving us love, asking us what do we need. And I could feel their heaviness too. And then we talk about what my heaviness is, what their heaviness is, and then that makes us feel better. I still go home afterwards, but I feel better. I just need that me time to care for myself, because I don't want to take anything out on anybody that's mine to deal with.
I'm going to move us back to affinity groups really quick. Once you started talking about them, things
Mm-hmm.
started popping up. So
Okay.
just a couple other, questions about them. So any suggestions for how to start affinity groups, or what are good first steps for an organization to take? And then also what to do if there's difficulty within kind of that group. Do you get somebody, an expert, a DEI, EDI expert in to kind of support that group and involvement? Just what are your suggestions on that?
So again, when we put fillers out there and saying that these are the struggles that we're having, and I feel like we was taking stuff out on each other. So, and again, there's certain people, and there's a lot of people of color who don't want to speak up in front of white people because they don't want to hear what they have to say, because a lot of times when you don't understand something, you're going to say something that is offensive. So I think the pitch should be that I think that we should have a space so where we can talk about what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, and there's some things that we want to do, but we don't know how to do them. So let them know that the purpose of it is so to strengthen communication amongst those who look like you, and then to be able to learn how to communicate with those who don't look like you, to understand how to support other people who don't look like you. But first, you got to establish what is it in this group that you want to get out the group. Once you establish that, then you can start building on the group itself and expanding it out. If there's conflict within the group, guess what? You got to figure that out within yourself, because the conflict is coming from within you. What is the conflict? That is something you got to try to figure out within yourself. However, if you can't get past it, then you would bring in another white person like Robin DiAngelo or like a Tim Wise, and they are white people who are around here having these have platforms and businesses, white people talking to other white people. So they can seek those people out and let them come in, because statistics shows that it's harder for people to listen to other people who don't look like them. So if there is conflict, you got to get someone who's been doing the work, someone who look like you, to come in to help resolve the problem.
Thank you. Okay, off of affinity groups. Now we have a question. How do we address colonized minds who shame, spiral, and are immobilized by despair? Folks who believe there's nothing that we can do.
Well, these questions are kind of hard for me to answer, because I know
Mhm.
who I am, and I know I have a big personality. So my response may not be for everybody. When those things happen, I make those a teachable moments. So let's say someone is on this training and was like, why are we having this conversation? What is this for anyway? Then I'll turn it back on them. Then why are you here? Why did you show up? You know, because a lot of time when we spew things out of our mouth, again, we can't see ourselves. And so sometimes we will say things not even realizing where it's coming from or why we even said it. And sometimes we won't even know that we said it. And so somebody say, did you hear what you just said? And they're like, what? What did I say? And then they repeat it back to the person like, oh, I didn't realize I said that. So I make those the teachable moments where instead of me having to answer a question that's really designed for you to answer within yourself, I put it back on them to make them sit with that question or make them sit with whatever it is that like, why are you so hard on yourself? Um, there's I just there's a an example that's coming up, but I don't think that it's relevant to this particular question. Um, or maybe it is. I'll just tell it, and if it's not, then I'll revisit. But so I do have white friends, not a white friend. I have white friends. God, some of them are more advanced in this work than others. Some of them still say stupid stuff, but because I know their heart is in the right place, I'll just look at them. They're like, okay, what did I say this time? So they already know. I help them out. I don't throw them away. So one woman works in the criminal justice field, and she could see what is happening. It was racist. The judge was being racist. And I think it's called a dissent. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it's called dissent when you write up something. And there's certain things you're not supposed to put in a report. She put it in a report. I said, why did you do that? I think she put this judge is a racist and or no. Bias played out in this case, and I think it need to be reevaluated or something like that. So she's basically calling out the judge. And I asked her, well, why are you why are you doing this? Like, she thought she was helping the cause. She thought she was standing for what is right. Her intent was good, but what good would it have been for her to get fired when people who look like me need her in that position? And then her family loses out because now that's one less income coming into the house. So because she didn't know what else to do, and because she was feeling guilty, and because she was feeling powerless, she almost destroyed herself and her career and her family, the finances to her family. And that's something that has to stop as well. So it's not that she self-hated herself, it's just the fact that she felt powerless. And this is what some white people do when they feel powerless, they self-destruct. That's not helpful. We need you where you are. We need you to do what you can. So we need you not to self-destruct.
Another question. Uh, how do you keep your equity champions engaged while addressing the 101 levels of anti-racism, anti-oppression so that we can catch everyone in the journey?
You know what? You're a lot of people color particularly say, I'm tired of teaching white people. They got to get their own, they need to learn themselves and this and the other. What I can tell you is people of color and any other person, not just people of color, the LGBTQ community, they get tired too of having to repeat themselves. The Jewish people just people just get tired, right? People will be more motivated, less tired, have more energy if they feel like they was being heard. If they feel like that they're being taken seriously, if they feel like their contribution to the conversation is of value, then they would not mind so much. And then you can keep it going. But when you're constantly showing ignorance and when you're constantly dismissing and when you're constantly taking someone's story and you're changing their narrative because it doesn't fit, because you don't have any reference for it, that's what a problem coming at. That's what a divide coming at. Um, so how do I keep my base energized? I keep them energized by keeping it real. That's what they want. They want somebody who's going to tell the truth and not hide behind whatever.
Thank you, Sharonda. So we have this question, clinical question, and this person has identified as a white clinician.
Mhm.
I almost never see white clinician, or sorry, let me start again. I almost never see white clients come into therapy asking to work with their own racialized story. But of course, all of our stories are racialized. I have tried different ways of bringing in curiosity, awareness of race with white clients, but without much success. Do you have tips, recommendations, resources for helping white people move through the early stages of change as related to addressing racial identity development in therapy?
Well, again, and a couple of the slides that I had up was one of the reasons why it's difficult for white people to bring that up. Hmm. I will speak here where I'm at. This is a research hospital, and everybody loves statistics, and everybody loves to have these conversations when it's very clean. What am I saying? Where it's very sterile. They don't mind having a sterile conversation. We're just looking at, data or whatever case may be. The harder conversations for them is when they have to look within themselves. And it's hard for anybody who have the privilege and have the privilege who's never had to deal with their discomfort. They can pass it off, blame, like I said in this training, blame someone else or, blame something or someone else because they have the privilege not to have to deal with it. So until something happens, something sparks within them to make them curious, to make them want to know more, then I don't know how much more can happen. But I tell you what, once this stuff start being in a DSM, once this stuff start becoming part of the training curriculum, I know in Washington State, and I can't speak for any other state, but in Washington State, and I don't know if it starts this year or next year, but in order for us, those who have license through the state, in order for us to have continue to get our license, we have to have continuing educational hours. Well, now it's mandated and mandatory that we have to have equity, diversity, inclusion training as part of those continuing hours. And for some people, until it's mandated, they're going to keep their privilege intact and be like, I ain't got to touch it. I'm not going to touch it until I have to touch it. So we will start seeing more hearts and minds change when they start getting involved. And in my opinion, I think the only reason why the things, because people kept saying, well, why was it George Floyd? All the other black men that was killed, why was it George Floyd? The pandemic stopped everything. All the distractions were gone. We had to sit and pay attention. We wasn't running here doing this, worried about this, because they even gave us money. The federal government even gave us money to make sure that we're going to be all right. So we had our basic needs taken care of, roof, clothes, shelter, our family was in check or whatever. And now we're watching the news. And now we have time to really look and see what's going on. And now we have time to process what's going on and understanding what's going on. And it's like, what? This cannot be real. Now it's time to take action. So it's until people begin to slow down, pay attention, and understand why things are the way they are, and their curiosity get piqued, then they start asking questions, then changes start happening. So to try to answer your question directly, this is what I would say. When things come up in your clinic, at your inside your clinic, and it's something around like bathrooms or gender neutral bathrooms or around aging, anything that's around anything that will cause controversy, if you will, let that be a teachable moment. Just because people say they're not ready, you can still drop seeds and it will grow in its own time. So just because they're not asking for it, just because they're acting like they don't want it, it doesn't mean that they won't be ready for it at another time in their life. But if we don't ever drop that seed, then nothing will ever grow. And that's including knowledge.
Love it. Love it. Next question is how how do you ask an agency to do a good DEI training and options for good, not whitewashed for a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit in a quote white Republican area?
Well, I've been in white Republican areas and done training. The best thing is to don't have nobody inside of your organization do the training. That's one thing you don't want because it will not, it be, in my opinion, it'd be very polished. So look outside of the agency, even look outside of your county. If it's really white race or whatever the case may be, you got to look outside of your county and agency because again, you would just create an echo chamber. If we want to listen to the same things constantly, nothing new on the horizon, same thoughts, you're not gonna get much. So look outside. I've done training in rural what is called the rural medical conferences. I've done training in rural areas in Oregon. I've done area trainings in rural areas in Indiana. Chicago isn't rural, but yeah, bring someone in from the outside to come in, because and because there's some things that can be said from those who are coming in from the outside. They can bring a different perspective because they're not of that mindset in which that agency or that town is in.
Yes, and absolutely, Sharonda, you just don't do, presentations for us. So reach out. You do great work everywhere. Another question is, in recent years, Robin DiAngelo has been seen as somewhat controversial.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little on that and or share a perspective?
Yeah, but anything worth talking about is going to be controversial. So then my question is, what is it about what she's saying is so controversial? And like I said, if it brings tension, if it brings awareness, if it brings frustration, if you feel like you're getting defensive, then what exactly are you defending? And last week's training, there was a young lady who brought up, she said, just because I have trauma in my body doesn't make me a racist. No one said that. So if that's what you was feeling, that sounded like a defensive comment to me. I didn't take offense to it. I'm just saying that that's how it sounded to me. So again, if you go back to, can you guys still see my slides? Can you see my slides still? Okay. So when it goes back to danger, people tend to get defensive when they feel like danger is coming to them, not necessarily in bodily harm, but the second one where it says a threat or danger, or it could feel like a threat to you, a threat to what you say, a threat to what you do, a threat to what you say, a threat to what you care about, believe in, or yearn for. So if you're getting defensive, where is the threat? Is the threat in your livelihood? Is a threat in, your reputation? Is a threat in you think someone is accusing you of something? If you're getting defensive about something that's being said at a training where no one knows you personally, what are you defending? What are you scared of? Why don't you want to be vulnerable? Why is it so hard for you to sit in your discomfort, versus trying to put it out there to put it on someone else? And let me just put this out there. If if we truly believe, and I truly believe this, but if you truly believe that growth comes from discomfort, then why are we so scared to be uncomfortable? If we learn in our discomfort, then why do we run from it? Why do we try to numb ourselves from it, right? Um, if someone blames me for something I know I'm not responsible for, and I say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Peyton, I didn't mean to say that, I didn't mean to do that, blah 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 blah." He's like, so now I've just taken the responsibilities. I am taking on something that I did not do, something I may have said, something I may have done, may have triggered a reaction within someone, but it doesn't mean I'm responsible for it. I may be responsible for triggering it, but I'm not responsible for what you're carrying. What you're carrying and what you need to unload, that's your responsibility. But if I take that on, And I take away an opportunity for you to sit in your discomfort, for you to feel your feelings, and for you to ask yourself, what is going on with me that I'm feeling this way? I've had comments last week that says, I am uncomfortable, but thank you for the challenge. That is a very reasonable response. Didn't blame anybody, admitted that they was comfortable, but it also admitted that they're being challenged and they're sitting in it. And one last thing, I want you to think about something. Think about a time when you went through a very hard time, a very hard experience, and if you came out that experience, and because of that experience, you was better. It was all the better, all the stronger, all the wiser. Then why would you not want to have that experience?
Well, that's a great question to sit with. Absolutely. Um, our next question is about responding. So somebody
Sorry about this.
living in a community, being harassed, ignored, threatened, rejected, um, believing it's due to the color of their skin. They want to be kind and respectful, and just asking for examples of language to use, um, that expresses their hurt, but is, I guess, respectful, responsive to the people who are treating them that way.
I don't think I fully got that.
Yeah.
So someone lives in a community where they feel like they're harassed.
Being harassed, ignored, threatened, rejected, thinking due to the color of their skin. They want
Uh-huh.
to be kind and respectful. They need language to use to express their hurt in response to the treatment that they're receiving.
Got it. Um, I will want to ask one other question. How would they
Yeah.
know that this is happening? If the person is opening up
There,
to them, go ahead.
yeah. So I was leaving some things out, but this is a person, a Caucasian person living in an indigenous community, um, being harassed, ignored, threatened, rejected due to the color of their skin. They want to be kind and respectful, and asking for what language could they use to express their hurt in response to the treatment that they're receiving.
If this is a white person on a native land, because that history is very deep
Mm-hmm.
rooted, I'm going to reserve. I don't feel qualified to answer that question because I'm not native.
Okay.
Um, I I if you want to email me, I can ask my native friends and I can respond to you, but I don't feel qualified to answer that question because I don't want to injure you by pretending like I know something when I don't, and I don't want to cause any more issues between you and your neighbors. So if you want to email me, I can ask my native friends that I meet with every week, and I can ask the question and I can respond to you in email. That's the best I can do.
That's great. Thank you. Um, can you speak to the difference between safe spaces and brave spaces, and how we can use them to make progress in uncomfortable conversations?
Brave spaces is showing up to something like this and speaking your truth. Brave. Safe spaces is more what I was talking about. It's safer than this, which is the Xfinity group and the caucusing group. Or the other safe spaces would be for uh, you know how they have like AA meetings, but it's closed. When like I was part of a cohort and I had the same exact people for 2 years, it was a safe space. Um, Creating a space and then closing it off, that's how you create your safe space. Um, the courageous space is when you show up and you show up as your authentic self and speak your authentic truth. That is a brave space from my perspective.
Thank you.
I'm sorry this got so dark. I don't know why.
Let's
see.
Oh, the background.
Yeah. Let's try to lighten
Maybe
this up a little bit.
The sun is shifting. How do we support individuals who are experiencing white fragility, who are allies, yet also tasked to move DEI within the workplace?
Get them the book. White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And I will tell you this, about 7 months ago, I'm working with King County on a $25 million grant to help build generational wealth in the Black communities and in the Indigenous community. And matter of fact, Department of Health is starting to do one for environmental justice as well. So I'm pretty happy with what I'm starting to see. And there was this white lady who I've been on Zoom for the last 2 years with this lady. We ran into each other in a restaurant. I recognized her. We talked. We hit it off very well. She was telling me that she has a EDI business where she goes out and do trainings for companies and stuff like that. And so she asked me to be on her committee, and I didn't vet her, but you think you're familiar with somebody because you've been on a email or Zoom with them for the last almost 2 years, and you heard what they have to say, so you think everything is good. Well, there was an event. So again, we meet once a week, 2 hours a week, and that space is for Indigenous and Black voices. It doesn't mean that, and then the other people that are there are only supposed to be there to support and uplift Black Indigenous voices. That's what that platform was designed for. Well, she started taking up a lot of space on that platform, and I called her out on it, and she did not like it. So she was talking about equality. I said, but this is not about equality. I said this is about equity. So let me go back here so you know what I'm talking about. We was talking about this. She said, I feel that everyone should be able to X, Y, and Z. I said, yeah, but not on this platform. This platform is for equity. And sometimes people just have a hard time with feeling like that they're not getting their fair share. So for people who feel like that, I want to tell you that you got your fair share up top. We trying to get ours in the end. On the back end. You got yours on the front end. We're trying to get ours on the back end. And that still doesn't sit well with some people. So needless to say, she was getting frustrated and irritated with me. And so she went and turned to her white mentor. And her mentor says, well, she is giving you, talking about me, she's giving you a gift. She's giving you the gift to let you know how you're coming off and how you're impacting. She's letting you know. She's telling you that this is injuring her and that, this space is not designed for people who look like us. So take a step back, take a breather, sit with yourself, evaluate what is happening inside of you. Even if you're overwhelmed right now, take a couple days, get back to her. She took a couple days. She forwarded me, because was texting. She forwarded me the response that her mentor gave her, which her mentor was spot on. And she got back with me about 3 days later, and she says, I am sorry. You're right. I've let you down. I let other people down in that space. I am committed to doing better. But I've still decided I'm going to take a step. I'm going to resign from her board. And so she was like, but why? We're learning, we're growing. This is my thing. Me as a Black woman, I'm explaining to you, I'm using my words to explain to you your impact in that space. Just in that, I'm not judging your commitment to the work. I'm not criticizing your commitment to the work. All I'm saying is we need to reclaim this space because it was designed for us, Black and Indigenous people. And if you can't hear what I was saying, why would I think you would hear what I'm saying or even take me seriously if I'm sitting on your board? I'm not sitting on your board. I'm done. And she still keeps sending me meeting minutes. And like, I didn't tell her that I was off her board. So it's like, sometimes you just don't want to hear what you don't want to hear. But I'm telling you, I'm not going to do it. I'm done. And then it really makes me question, how well of a job are you doing in your committee if you can't hear what I'm telling you? And without taking it personal, knowing, because you said you've been doing this work for over 50 years, knowing that different people have different experiences and that you were not even open to. I don't know. See, we got about 6 more minutes, so I guess we got about a couple more questions.
Yeah, a couple more. This is kind of going back to, I think, your clinic. What does the rupture repair process look like where you're at when conflicts do arise?
Okay. Well, it's the same protocol. Now we're just practicing it. Like, let's say if my peer who was equal to me was disrespectful or was racist or whatever case may be, I'll go, because who I am, I'll go to that person. Not everybody feel comfortable doing that. So then I'll get someone. So if someone is not comfortable doing it themselves, then they can bring a buddy with them to have that conversation. And then that is escalated to the supervisor and on up or whatever. And hopefully we can get it resolved before it have to hit HR. But if it has to go to HR, then it has to go to HR. So we created that system. And then I believe in teachable moments. So when some stuff was going down, one of the white managers, so I'm in a meeting, and the question was, we was having a bunch of problems with our templates. And one thing I did not touch on, and before I go on with this story, is we have to be cognizant and conscious of what we write in people's charts. What notes what biases are showing up in the writings? What I've noticed is that people of color get more, not participating, not taking it seriously, so you're going to close them. But then you have white people who have the same reason not to show up. And it's like, oh, this person had to work, oh, this person and you get more excuses, and leadway is given to white people than there's people of color. So we really got to be careful of our biases when we're dealing with people and what we're writing into their charts. Because that will come back. And that's another thing we did. We start checking each other's chart and finding each other's written biases in people's chart. And it's like, this is no, this is not good. Let me tell you why. So on to the to the other the rest of the story, which was what story was I on? Oh, so in a meeting, and our templates wasn't working. So one of the managers had asked, well, who is responsible for the template? The only thing I said was when they said the name, I said, no wonder. That's all I said. That white manager jumped down my throat. You got to be careful how you talk about people. And this person's a good worker, and she's a hard worker. And she did it. I turned around and looked her dead in her face. I said, so please tell me how you jump from me saying, no wonder, to all this other stuff. You created a narrative that I did not say, that you heard just by me saying one thing. No wonder. I said, so you explain that to me. So I was titles is another thing that prevent people from having a courageous conversation. Oh, I'm scared I'm gonna get fired, or are they gonna, surveillance me, or are they gonna whatever. I don't care. You don't get to talk to me that way. You don't get to talk at me. You don't get to talk down to me. You get to talk to me. We could have a hard conversation, but you're not gonna come at me as if I did something wrong just because I have an opinion. I can have an opinion. I have the right to have an opinion like everybody else. So with that, I asked her to explain this to me. She couldn't explain it to me. And so I was heated. I came back to my office. I sent her an email. Yep. So she was like, okay, well, you and your manager come to my office and we're going to sit up and have a conversation. As soon as I walked in with my manager is actually Black too. She was like, you're right. I shouldn't have said that. I escalated the situation, by this, that, and the other. And then she goes on to say, but did you have a problem with this particular person? I said, this person overwhelms herself. And then we do things that make us have to go back and redo this work. The work is already hard. We already have a lot of paperwork. And now you make us go redo it because you're overwhelming yourself. Oh, I knew it. I knew you had a problem. I said, so does this take away your apology? Does this take away your actions and how you showed up? Just because I do have an issue with her, still the only thing I said was no wonder. It's almost like when a person get killed and they want to bring in their history, or they use drugs, whatever. What that got to do with that moment? It has absolutely nothing to do with that particular moment, and they want to create a reason as to why they did what they did, or what or said what they said, when they had none of that background prior to the stuff hitting the fan. So we got to be smarter. We got to be smarter than this, and not fall for that kind of rhetoric, if you will. Are we kicked out? What's going on?
No, you're not. Sorry. I was trying to
Oh,
share my screen and I don't know if it came forward. I'm seeing a blank screen. So I apologize for that, everybody. It was supposed to be our survey QR code as we are wrapping up. I apologize. Let me stop sharing. Okay. So we're back and it's just us.
okay.
Um, Sharonda, thank you so very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for being here. Thank you for sharing this presentation with all of us. Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate your time, your effort, all the hard work that went into this. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for sharing it.
I
Um,
appreciate everybody that showed up, and I thank you guys for giving me the platform. And this is how we're going to change things.